Hello, everyone. Today we're going to take a look at the first commentary of the Ramban on Chumash. The Ramban comments on the passuk of Bereishet bara Elokim, quoting Rashi, and we're going to understand by looking at what the Ramban says, a fundamental understanding for why the Torah begins with the passuk of Bereishet bara Elokim. Following in Rashi's footsteps, Ramban quotes Rashi, who explains that the reason that the Torah begins with the story of Bereishet bara Elokim et Hashemayim et Haaretz is for the reason to establish the principle that the land is created by God, and this is important for the matter of fact that when any other nation comes and tries to claim that a certain land belongs to them, the answer always is that every land was created by God. That is what the Rashi says on the first passuk of the Torah, for why the Torah begins with Bereishet bara Elokim, as opposed to perhaps starting with the first mitzvah in the Torah. That's what Rashi says. The first Rashi on the Torah is very famous. Ramban begins to comment on this Rashi and try to explain it. Though in doing so, Ramban first asks a question on this Rashi. Ramban asks, perhaps you could give a reason for why the Torah begins with the passuk of Bereishet. A different reason might be that this passuk of Bereishet bara Elokim is establishing what the Ramban calls a shorash ha'emunah, a fundamental principle that has to be established. And that fundamental principle is that God created the world. Bereishet bara Elokim. And that is why the passuk begins with Bereishet bara Elokim, but not only the passuk, that is why the entire Torah begins with this phrase. The Ramban says, though, that is not a good answer. We can't say that the Torah begins with Bereishet bara Elokim to establish this general principle that Hashem created the world purely. That's not the main purpose why the Torah begins with this passuk as opposed to any other passuk. Rather, the Ramban says the entire creation, meaning from Bereishet through the Shisha Yemei Bereishet, all the way through the creation story, is a sod amuk, a very deep secret, something that is not purely understandable from the text. There is more going on behind the text, much more. And for that reason, the Ramban says there's a different passuk that establishes that God created the world. In Shmot, we read, Ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem et hashemayim et haaretz, in Perek Chaf in Shmot. So therefore, Ramban says, I'm going to give a defense and explain Rashi for why Rashi says that the Torah begins with Bereishet bara Elokim, for the reason being to establish that all land is created by God, and therefore no other nation can claim a land to be specifically theirs on the grounds that is just purely theirs. Ramban is establishing this principle, and he explains Rashi in the following manner. Rashi, when he says that the land is created by God, and that principle has to be established, Ramban explains that this principle is mishpat ha'elokim ba'aretz me'olam. This principle is something that has always existed in the land. Every single land that exists in the world, Hashem created it, and no other nation can claim that they conquered it, and because of this reason purely, that land is theirs. Rather, Hashem will decide and be the arbiter and decide who will inherit the land, who will be able to live in the land. And the Ramban famously says, Kishiratsu natnu lahem, Kishiratsu natlu michem v'natnu lanu. Hashem can choose to give the land maybe to 7 nations that we will then conquer in Eretz Canaan. Though the matter of fact being Hashem can choose when to give us the land as Hashem created it. Hashem is the divine providence that's watching over us. And the Ramban believes that is what Rashi is establishing in this first passuk. The takeaway being that Hashem created the land and all of its inhabitants. And for that reason, Hashem is controlling and constantly involved in our lives. And this message can hopefully be taken to heart for us, and we can gain meaning from why the Torah begins with Bereishet bara Elokim, and as well meaning to us in our daily lives as well. Have a good Shabbos.